Hello everybody, this is Helen Sanderson, and in a moment I'll introduce Sylvia Crick to you as well. Thank you for joining us on our Personalisation in Home Care webinar, and we'll start with Sylvia introducing the different people that we've been working with. Sylvia.
Hi everybody, I work for ARC Scotland, and we support a consortium of providers to build capacity around self-directed support across 4 local authority areas, including Dumfries and Galloway, funded by the Scottish Government. And we were delighted to be invited to be part of this piece of work, which is a partnership between Real Life Options Lowland Care, Lowburn Housing Association, Helen Sanderson Associates, and Dumfries and Galloway Council, and now ourselves. So we've been involved in the project leadership meetings which have happened, and in the training days for managers, and we're really keen to share the learning from this in due course as we start to see what impact this is having locally. But we were really delighted to be involved in this because it's been clear through the work we've been doing around self-directed support that the home care sector faces particular challenges in delivering truly personalised services. So that's who's been involved, and we're just at the fairly early stages of this piece of work, and I'm handing you back now to Helen.
Thank you, Sylvia. So although the piece of work that we're talking about took place in Dumfries and Galloway, we've been exploring how to personalise home care with a range of organisations. So the purpose of this webinar is to share the thinking behind what we've been trying and learning, and then we're hoping to do a follow-up webinar in a few months' time, early in the new year, to share some of the real stories and examples that have come out of the work in Dumfries and Galloway. So the slide you can see at the moment is the principles that we were trying to embrace and adopt within home care. We wanted to know how close we could get to some of this. And the what you can see here is I can use my hours and budget flexibly, and I can choose what I'm supported with. So one of our challenges was people might get a half an hour visit, a 20-minute visit, or even a 15-minute visit. And it's how that can be used flexibly and how we can build that towards something that's called an individual service fund, which is where a provider is able to deliver a service really flexibly, exactly in the way that the person wants, where, who with, and when. So who we wanted to explore as well. How close can we get to people being able to choose who works with them and supports them? How close can we get to people choosing the when they get support, and the days of the week and times? How they're supported, and how can we really make sure that people are involved in all the decisions about their life and service. And people, obviously the where is that people are supported at home, but can we extend that as well? So you might be listening to this thinking, how on earth can you make that happen in home care? So I want to share with you some of what we've been trying and learning. So part of what we wanted to do is to explore how person-centered practices can be used to make the changes that I've just started to describe. So these are some of the ones that we've been using. We've been looking at one-page profiles for individuals and for staff as well. We haven't really got to communication charts and decision-making agreements yet, but we can really see the potential of that in home care. We've been using the donut to explore what are staff members' core responsibilities around supporting an individual, and where can they use their creativity and judgment. The next illustration is a person-centered review, which we've introduced to every 6 months. Matching support takes us to the how can people choose who supports them, and we've done some thinking and practice around that as well. And learning logs, how can we keep learning about what we're doing, about the person, and use that to update the one-page profiles. And finally, working together for change. We did this within home care a couple of months ago, and that information came from the person-centered reviews, and we'll tell you a bit more about that in a few minutes. This is John. John is somebody who is supported in Scotland, and when we started to think about how we could personalise home care even further, we used John as an example to think this through. Now, John is actually somebody who the Chief Executive of Real Life Options, Brian, had been shadowing as part of his introduction to home care in Scotland. So we started to think about what would be the ideal experience for John. So Brian told us the story of John's experience in home care, and we're going to use that to explain this graphic here. But in a few minutes, I'll go through each of these elements in detail. So John's story, as told by Brian, was that Brian told a beautiful story of how he went in with one of the home care workers that he was shadowing to meet John. And he introduced himself to John, and he saw that John had a photo of some family and friends on the side of the table. So Brian talked a bit about his own son. There was some washing to be got out of the washing machine. So Brian was trying to make himself useful and got the washing machine, the washing from the washing machine out as well. When Brian and the carer left John's home, she turned to Brian and said, "Well, you'd have got sacked for that. You've broken 2 of the rules already." And Brian said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, the first thing was you shared some personal information about yourself and your family, and we're not allowed to do that. And the second thing was you got stuff out of the washing machine, and that's not on our task list. You're not allowed to do that. So we started to explore John's story and thought together about if we were really trying to make this as personalised as we can, what would John's new experience be? And I'll take you through this diagram step by step. So what we imagined was, and we had a social worker with us in the room, so she helped us to understand what the actual process was, that at the assessment and referral stage, Jo, the social worker, would meet John in hospital. She would do the assessment of John, and she'd have a think about what kind of package would work best for John. Now, in our ideal situation, John's involved in the decision about the package, and an email is sent to Helen, the care coordinator, as part of the referral. Then the first thing Helen does is meet John, and based on the information that she's already gleaned from the assessment and the very specific tasks that Jo, the social worker, will have decided that John required for his service, she'd look at both of those and develop John's one-page profile with him. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with one-page profiles, but there are 3 sections to that. What we appreciate about the person, what's important to them from their perspective, and what good support looks like. So we thought that was going to be really, really important information to understand about John as you're beginning to design and deliver John's service. The other thing there is it says core responsibilities. So what we'd also do is say, given what your service is commissioned to do, so that might be around supporting John around his meals and his medication, given what's important to you as a person, John, and given what good support looks like for you, what are the must-dos or the core responsibilities that have to happen at every visit? And what are the things that would be great to do if the person's got time? Now, you might be listening to this thinking, well, there's never a situation where people have got more time than they can use. But I was talking to another home care organisation, and one of the non-executive directors, his mother is supported by the organisation. And he says that he can tell that the carers who are providing support to his mum do their work, and then they sit and read the newspaper, and he knows that this has been happening. And what we want to happen is that the carer goes in and they're really clear about what they must do, but they've also got a list of other things that if they have completed the things that they're commissioned to do, or the core responsibilities within the time that they've got, they also know what else they can be doing to support the person. And what this looks like in practice is for John, on the inside of the cupboard of where he keeps his mugs, there's a Polly Pocket. It's got John's one-page profile in it, and on the back of that, it's got what are your core responsibilities or must-dos on every visit for John, and where can you use your judgment? What are the good things to do if you've got time? So I'd like to introduce you to Hilda. Hilda was 92 in this photo, and this photo is taken of the 2 of us as I was learning about how home care could be different and learning about that with Hilda. And one of the things that we did with Hilda is to develop her one-page profile on the first day that we met her, the first day we were assessing what kind of support Hilda needed. And as you can see from this example, the list about what's important to Hilda includes her family and some of the important relationships. It includes watching old films, and it gives you the detail about what those are like. It tells you about watching soaps and the particular ones that she watches, about her garden and how important that is, about cakes and scones and going to church, and her neighbours as well. Because what we appreciate about Hilda is a really important part of her one-page profile and her reputation as well. And then some really clear and specific information about how to support Hilda. And the first thing that you can see in capital letters is never ask to borrow her DVDs or videos. They are so important to Hilda that she'd be very anxious about lending them to anybody else. But as you can see there's some very clear and specific information that anybody who's a carer for Hilda, who's going in to support her, needs to know, but is unlikely to be in the typical notes or assessment information that we usually collect about people. So I hope that you can see there, if that was all the information that you had to go and support Hilda, you could probably do quite a reasonable job. In addition to that, as I said, there's the donut of what the core responsibilities are in supporting somebody and where people can use their creativity and judgment, and also not what's your paid responsibility. So the organisation that we're supporting Hilda is called United Response, and Hilda's relative is called Jill and her other family. So together they did this piece of information that says what are the core responsibilities of the organisation, of the family, and the support worker or the carer. And the core responsibility for the carer is to make sure they know and understand the information on Hilda's one-page profile. And Hilda's commissioned support is supported to go to Sainsbury's to do her shopping together. Where support workers can use their creativity and judgment is how you talk to Hilda, how you have conversations with her, whether you get her papers or not with her, whether you get bread. Make sure that you have a cup of tea and biscuit or cake with Hilda if you've got time, and how you put Hilda at ease and develop a good relationship with her. And it's also really clear about what's not your paid responsibility. So everybody who's providing support in home care really needs to know who the person is, what's expected of them per visit, and what else they can do if there's time, but also what's not their paid responsibility. So to go back to Ellen and John, the first thing that Ellen would do is develop a one-page profile in the way that looking a bit the same way as Hilda's does, and start to think about what the service is for, what the core responsibilities are, and where they can use creativity and judgment. And the core responsibilities both relates to what's important to John and what the social worker has assessed him as needing to have with his home care service. The next thing that she does is find out the people who John gets on with so that we can match John with his own staff team. So we think the closest that we can get to John choosing his own staff isn't about John recruiting his own staff, because at the moment we can't think about a way that we could do that that would be effective and possible within home care services. But it's really about matching John to the people who'd get on with him best. Now this is one of the person-centered thinking tools that we used with Hilda as well, to find the best people to match to Hilda. And the way that we did that was by having the one-page profiles of staff. So we used that to see what kind of match we can get between Hilda and the staff who live locally. So the first thing that we do is find out the staff who are geographically nearest. So in order to make this possible in terms of people travelling to people's houses to provide the service for them, and to minimise the amount of travel time that people end up spending, it's starting off with who's locally in the area. So let's imagine for Hilda there might be 5 people who live close enough to her. We then want to make sure that we've got staff that can deliver both the support needed and the skills needed. And for Hilda, that's particularly about having somebody who's a car driver. Then the next thing we do is match to personality characteristics. How close can we get to this being an older woman? And obviously we're paying attention to equal opportunities legislation, but it's, how close can we get to that? How close can we get to somebody who's outgoing without being loud? Somebody who's naturally at ease with people, who's sensitive, who's confident and empathetic. So it may be out of the 5 potential people, there are 2 or 3 that are both geographically close, are car drivers, and fit some of the personality characteristics that Hilda wants. And then the next thing we do, in order to make a final decision about those 3 people, and Hilda only needed 2 members of staff to support her to cover the shifts. We were looking for 2 people who liked movies, and in particular old movies, and who enjoyed old-time music, particularly Vera Lynn, Susan Boyle, and Ali Jones, who you might not consider old-time, but singers from the 1940s and 50s. So of course we couldn't find a perfect match, but this gave us a way of getting as close to that as possible. How close can we get to be the best fit for people? And one of the things that we've heard from many, many people who receive home care services is having different staff turning up all the time, who you've never met before, or you may have only met once or twice, who you're having to share the same information with over and over again, is exactly the opposite of the kind of personalised service that we're talking about here. So Hilda was really clear that because she only needed a service for one afternoon a week, the organisation supporting her thought that could be delivered with just 2 members of staff. But that was different for John. John would need a full-time, a basic team of 5 or 6 people to provide John's support on a regular basis, and then ideally 2 or 3 other people who could cover when the staff team were off or where they were taking holiday, which were people who John already knew. So the way that this happened was by looking at the one-page profiles of the different staff members. And what I've got here is a one-page profile from another organisation, Dimensions, and a staff member's one-page profile that, again, goes into the detail of family life, home life, what she likes to do with her friends, what good work looks like for her, listening to all kinds of music and having it really loud. And it's only if we've got the kind of hobbies and interests of staff on their one-page profile can we go anywhere near matching them and getting a good fit with the person as well. So let's imagine now that John has got a staff team of 4 or 5 people who are matched to him, and ideally Ellen would have been able to show him the one-page profiles of 7 or 8 people, and John might have been involved in that discussion. But to be really honest, that's still really early days for us. The most that we're able to achieve is matching people using their one-page profiles. Because the one-page profile was developed as part of the assessment process and part of the initial conversation that Ellen had with John, and also from the information from the assessment, we know that Ellen would have been able to do quite a good first draft one-page profile, but we also know that there'll be lots still to learn about what good support looks like for John and things that we might not have got completely right about what's important to John as well. So in this process, we ask the 6 people who are part of John's team to start by doing learning logs for the first 6 visits that they do. And this is so that instead of just ordinary progress notes, we can really capture some of the information. So the headings on a learning log are, at this time, who was there, what happened, what worked and what didn't work. So by capturing that information for the first 6 visits for each staff member, we will learn more information about what works for John and what doesn't work for John, which we can then use to update his one-page profile and, if necessary, update the donut or the service specification that says what are the core things that need to happen on each visit and where can people use their creativity and judgment. So in John's team, the team leader gathers all the one-page profiles together and has a monthly visit with John. And before that, he'll look at all the one-page profiles, look at what's worked and not worked, think about what his best guess is that means in terms of updating one-page profile and the service specification, and then go and spend 45 minutes or an hour with John on his monthly visit and use that together with John to update the one-page profile and the information about what must happen on each visit and what we'd like people to happen, if that's possible as well. The other more slightly formal way that we review how things are going is by doing a person-centered review every 6 months. And what that means is that John has the opportunity to invite either a neighbour or a friend or family to come and be part of the review. It would typically happen with John himself, friends and family, or a neighbour. If John is supported at the Housing Association, somebody from the Housing Association would also be there, and the team leader or the care coordinator, and if possible, a member of staff would be there as well. Now, it's a very informal meeting, and we work out with the person how we can either use flip charts to gather this information, or whether we do that on A4 pieces of paper as well. In Dumfries and Galloway, we've just completed the first 9 person-centred reviews, and somebody invited their neighbour to it. People typically invited their family. Sometimes it was just the staff supporting the person and somebody from the housing association and the facilitator as well. We worked really hard to create information and to think with the person about who they wanted to invite. And we used a person-centred practice called a relationship circle to think with John about who else who he might want to invite to his review. And then what we do is we ask, sorry, I meant to say that many of the reviews, the social worker was present as well, where that was possible. So as you can see here, the first thing is who's here, so we identify who's there. If this is a second person-centred review, we update people on the actions. We talk about what we appreciate about the person, and we start often with a positive opening round where people introduce themselves in relation to who they are in the person's life. So if Amanda was at John's review and she's somebody from the Housing Association, she'd introduce herself within that role and talk about something she appreciates about John, and we'd go around that way. Then we look together about what's important to John now, what's important to him in the future, and what good support looks like for John. And as you can remember, what's important to John and how to support him well and what we appreciate about him are the 3 headings for a one-page profile. So we'll already have some of that information. We also ask John what's important to him in the future. And this isn't the sort of, if you won the lottery, what would you like to do? But it's, is there anything that we could think about doing together over the next 6 months that you'd like to consider? And that doesn't mean that the home care organisation can do that, but it might be things that friends or family can pick up, or that we could signpost John or his friends and his family to as well. But sometimes there may be things that could fall within the remit of the home care organisation. Then we look at what's working and not working from John's perspective, from his family's perspective, from the staff's perspective and others' perspective. And then from that we decide on outcomes. And the outcome is, where does John want to be in 6 months in relation to changing what's not working for him, or moving towards what's important for the future, or questions that we need to answer. And then the actions are who's going to do what by when. So I've just got the information from one of the person-centred reviews from somebody who we'll call Claire. And what Claire said was important to her. She talked about her pets, Cindy the dog, and her cat and her birds are things that are really, really important to her. She talked about her 2 neighbours who really mattered to her, and her scooter being really important to her, and her computer, because that's how she stays in control of her finances through online banking. Then when we thought about what was important to her in the future, she said, I live day to day and I've not really got anything planned for the future, but maintaining my independence through my scooter and learning skills on my computer is really important to me, and also making sure my pets are healthy and happy. Then we looked at what's working and not working for Claire. What she said was, what was working for her is her pets and being able to look after them well, and her neighbours and the informal support that they provide, and having the same care on Mondays and Thursdays for her shower is really working for her. What's not working for her is the tea time visits are too early at times, because sometimes they're before 4 p.m. and that's too early for her. She also said that what wasn't working for her is having so many different carers. She said, I don't mind the odd new carer, but prefer to get to know them before they help me shower. It would be good to have a small group of regulars. And that really reflects what we were trying to put into place for John, so having a small group of regulars or people who do that. She then said, what's not working for me are carers who see me as just as job and don't see me as a human, and carers that aren't ringing to let Claire know if they're going to be late. So then we looked at what was working and not working for the home care organisation as well, which was looking after animals and how she's keeping her independence. And they also said that what wasn't working from their perspective is putting in new carers for Marion and for Claire, who doesn't know her. And then what they did was built on what really good support looks like for Marion. So it's support with tea on or after 4 p.m. But this is the main meal for her day, and it's really important that that happens after 4 p.m. And then an action plan to start to look at making sure that carers phone if they're going to be late, but really seeing if we could get that regular group of carers for Claire to address what's not working for her. So that's an example of the kinds of information that we get through a person-centered review that's a bit more detailed than what we'd get from looking at the learning logs and updating the one-page profiles there as well. So that's the 6-month review, and the diagram on the left there is the relationship circle that we'd use to figure out with the person about who to invite, and then the tick and the cross are what's working and not working from different perspectives. And this is where we hoped to move towards individual service funds, which is towards people knowing what their allocation was, i.e. how much time they had, and thinking more creatively and flexibly about how that could be used. And for 3 people out of the 9 people that we did person-centered reviews for, that happened. So we got agreement from the social worker that the number of hours or the number of sessions that they had per month could be aggregated together to a number of hours, and that Helen and John could think together about how that could be used more flexibly. So one person decided that they didn't need the support at the weekend and would prefer to have more support in the week, and that's what they agreed and the social worker made happen as well. Another person wanted one shorter visit and then have another visit that was half an hour to an hour, enable her to go into the village and do her own shopping with the carer that wasn't possible in the 15-minute sessions. So we're starting to get some early examples about how a person-centered review can help us to move towards a more flexible and individualized service with the social worker's permission, so that has to be agreed and signed off, but using the same amount of time, so it's no different time, but using it in different and more flexible ways that really works for the individual, and the service can make it work together as well. So as well as working directly with and supporting these changes with the home care organisation, what we know is that if we're not working with staff in a person-centred way, it makes it much, much harder for them to work with individuals in a person-centred way. So some of the other work that we did with the home care organisation Lowlands Care is starting to introduce some person-centred practices at a team level. So before we even started working with any individual who received a home care service, the very first thing that we did is develop one-page profiles for each of the staff members, both in the office and the people who are providing direct care as well. Because we wanted them to both understand what a one-page profile was by doing their own, and of course we needed those detailed one-page profiles to be able to do the matching. But the other thing that it does is help the managers really understand what good support looks like for each person as well. So either in team meetings or in the 4 supervisions that happen in a year, we can be paying more attention to what good support looks like for each individual staff member as well. We also did some work at an office level and thought together about what the office team's purpose was, their purpose in relation to people who use the services, their purpose in relation to each other, their purpose in relation to the organisation and commissioners, and being really clear together about what their core responsibilities were for delivering a great service to individuals and in relation to the organisation as well. The other thing that we did is got the team to decide how they could work together better. Not that they weren't working together really well, they were, but often it's a bit like if you go on a course and doing ground rules. It was about how the team having some agreements about how they were going to work together, and then coming back and saying what's working and not working, how are we doing well. So these were the team agreements that the office team at Lowland Care did. So it talks about respecting confidentiality, it's talking about being honest and respectful, it's talking about communicating really well with each other, taking responsibility for your own space, asking for help if they need it, strive to be reliable. When things go wrong, to share responsibility and not look for blame of any one individual. And if there's a problem between us, speaking directly and respectfully to the person concerned. Now, team agreements are great, and they're really powerful if you keep coming back and saying how well are we doing. So over the last month, the team at Lowlands Care came back together to say, how are we doing in relation to our team agreements? And a bit like with the person-centered review, saying what's working and what's not working and what can we do about it. So they identified 3 specific things that they thought weren't working so well, and then agreed some actions about what they were going to do to deliver it. And one innovative example that I'd like to share with you is the team agreement that says we'll all strive to be reliable and let each other know if we're going to be late or unavailable as soon as we know. One of the things that wasn't working is if team members phoned the managers but the managers weren't in the office, it was really difficult to get a message through to the rest of the team. So the team set up a closed Facebook group where they now post any messages about lateness or absences so that everybody can see that instantly. So I think that's a really good example of this particular group using social media in a closed way to communicate effectively with everybody, particularly about if they're going to be late or absent for any reason. The other thing we did is, as well as the team having one-page profiles, we pulled that together into a whole office team profile. And as you can see, we had to work really hard to get a photo of them all together, and we didn't quite achieve that. So it's got a blank space for the photo. But we talked about what they liked and admired about each other, what was important to the whole team about who they are and how they can support each other well, which is about having good fun and laughter at work, letting each other know if they need extra help, being flexible together and being honest, and what's important to us as a team as well, which includes, again, having laughed together but creating a welcoming atmosphere in the office that staff feel that they can discuss their frustrations without causing offence. So if you went into Lowlands Care, what you'd see is some of this information up on the wall in the office as a reminder about who this office team is and how they're trying to work together as well. So if you're interested in thinking about how you can deliver more personalised support for the people that you're thinking about in your organisation or organisation that you know of, one of the ways that you can get started is to check your progress using Progress for Providers. And if you're interested in this, Claire, who you emailed to be part of this webinar and who emailed you the details, can email you a PDF of this so that you can look at it perhaps together with your team or as a manager and go through it step by step and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 about how well you think you're doing. It's also a way of developing action plans to think through what you need to do next, and there's also a section of free resources at the back. You can also find this available for download on a website called progressforproviders.org. So that's progressforproviders.org.uk. And there are also Excel spreadsheets on the website that you can go into directly and input your scores and see how you're doing. So if anything that we've talked about is of interest to you, that might be a way that you could get started.